All right. Hello, everybody. This is Tom Aiken. I'm the founder of Boom Life and the creator of GPS Theory, a values-based decision-making system. And we created BoomShare to help people share their stories about the great things they're doing out there. And this morning, we're going to talk with Peter Awad. Peter's a native Floridian turned midwestern man. He's a technical marketer and growth hacker with roots in mechanical engineering. He then became an internet entrepreneur, having founded an e-commerce site that does 7 figures annually prior to co-founding GoodBlogs, a patent-pending content marketing platform. As a semi-decent husband and father of 4, his family travels extensively. And in spare time, he recently launched a podcast called The Slow Hustle, which dissects the balancing act of the startup and entrepreneur worlds with family and personal life, which I can certainly understand. So with all of that, Peter, I hope I did not massacre your last name. Welcome to BoomShare and episode number 16. And why don't you introduce yourself?
Cool. Thanks for having me, man. And I'm used to it. I've had my last name for obviously my whole life, and so I've been called Awad. You call me whatever you want. It's Awad, but it's the toughest 4-letter word to pronounce, I think, or one of the toughest. So, no worries there, man. Like I said, thanks for having me. You've done a great job introducing me. So I think that we can dive in.
Okay. Well, I also want to say having a last name of Aiken that starts with an E, I get it. People massacre my name all the time as well.
Sure. I could see that.
So we're going to talk about slow hustle, I think, and unless there's something else you want to cover, why don't you tell us what you're doing and kind of the values that drove you to start this up?
Yeah, it's something that's been what I say rolling around in my head for a really long time, and it's one of these things that I take kind of way back, and so I'll paint the picture really quickly. And so, parents immigrated from Egypt. They're both Egyptian. They didn't speak any English very much, anyways, and didn't have any money, kind of thing. So that's that usual story. Worked really hard, started a business, and at the age of 7, I started working there, and I'm working there for $5 a day, and really just like understanding what it takes to run a business, what it takes to make a buck. And I think that was probably my best education thus far in my life, or one of the best for sure. And so, within that, I see my dad kind of going through some things, and I see that one day he feels like he's crushed in the business and that he's doing really well. And sometimes the very next day, he'll come home and say, yeah, tell his wife, tell my mom, yeah, I think we're going to go out of business. And I remember thinking, like, this guy is he's out of his mind. Like, I don't understand how this can be the same person. But then, starting a business myself in college and then having these same feelings, I realized that, business can be incredibly manic depressive, incredibly isolating. But what was weird is that nobody talks about it. Like, everything's rosy from the outside. Like people say, everybody's family's perfect on Facebook. I think everybody's business is perfect when you talk to them. You ask them how they're doing. They say, yeah, I'm doing, we're busy. We're really busy. Things are doing great up and to the right, whatever you want to call it. And so what was interesting to me is like, I thought, well, geez, man, like I'm the only guy having trouble. Like I'm a loser, like why am I having these thoughts? Why am I going through these things? But then you start asking people questions and you realize they're going through the same exact thing. And so the idea in my head for a while was to start writing about these things and blogging and sharing these things, except I don't like writing. And so I just kept coming back to that. I'm like, well, I can't have a blog if I don't like writing, right? And so, I just kept kind of backburnering it until I had this realization. I'm like, well, I like talking to people. I like look at people face to face, whether it's through Skype or in person. I like having conversations. And what if these really meaningful conversations to me could be shared with other people? What if they could be archived? What if people could be a fly on the wall, so to speak, and glean some wisdom from this? And so that's when I was like, well, gosh, podcasting's so obvious. Like, how the hell did I not realize this before? And so that was kind of the impetus for Slow Hustle. That's how I got started. And the way that I committed to it was telling everybody that I was starting a podcast. And so once I told them that, I was like, okay, well, either I look like a failure or I make this thing work. And so from there it was born. And gosh, man, it's been probably one of the funnest things I've ever done.
Do you think part of the problem, Peter, with entrepreneurship and creating something new, part of the reason that we feel that kind of manic depressive, some days we're up, some days we're down, is it's really difficult sometimes for other people to understand when you create something new?
I think that's definitely one of them. I mean, there's a conference I just came from. One of the best conferences ever, I think, it's called Entrefest, and one of the phrases they have is "trust your crazy ideas." And then another thing that Andy Stoll mentions, shout out to him because he's an amazing guy, good person, is that if you get enough crazy people in a room, you start to feel less crazy. And so I think there's huge truth to that, because anybody outside of that, they think that you're, as an entrepreneur, you're just nuts. Like, you're bouncing from idea to idea, or you're taking what they think to be really, really risky chances, huge possibilities of failure, just all these things that are associated with entrepreneurship. And so I absolutely think that, that's part of it. I think that, you tell people things and you're really passionate about it, and you'll get shot down because their fear speaking through, coming through in their words and their opinion of what it is that you're doing.
And I think you touched on something really important there about, everybody wants to talk about how their business is doing well. And I think that's something else an entrepreneur has to get through when you have a new solution. We all want to project success, and yet we all have the same problems, or we all have problems that are very similar. And by projecting this image of success, wouldn't you say we're kind of marginalizing it, because we're limiting it to the experiences that we have, and not really opening our minds to, say, new solutions or different ways in which we could actually create more innovative ideas that we can use to grow?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that there are plenty of ideas that are out there that are amazing ones, maybe life-changing, maybe world-changing, that they don't come to fruition because enough people told them that it was a stupid idea. And the thing is that there can't be success without failure. Like, you can't have one without the other. And so if you're not taking chances and you're not failing, you're probably not shooting big enough, right? You're not going after big enough ideas. You hear that and you're like, oh, that's such a cliche thing to say, but I think there's huge truth there. If you're having success after success after success, there's a possibility that you're either not sharing your failures, or you're not going after big enough ideas. And in that, yeah, I mean, you're probably right. Then you're just going for these incremental changes versus some serious leaps.
Right, but I also say the incremental changes help kind of grease the wheels for the bigger leaps. And in companies that become stagnant, or people that become stagnant, usually it's because they've hit a certain level of success, and now they want to protect it. They want to maintain that status quo, and at that point they become very risk averse. And the truth you just explained is you can't really earn real rewards if you aren't willing to take the risk that you will also possibly be punished.
Yeah, and you just look at look at Amazon, huge company. A lot of people hate them, and I know why, and I understand it. And there's some of the reasons I probably don't like them either. But like, they launched this phone, this Fire phone, or whatever they called it, huge failure, right? And you think this company, they've got they got really deep pockets, lots of backers. They're doing a lot of things right. They've got to do some things wrong. Like, they got to go after that phone. Like, what if it was a success? And then the other things are that I always think about is, like, Zig Ziglar talks about the Ford Mustang, one of the best-selling cars for Ford of all time, came out of their most miserable, vehicle launch of all time. And I can't remember the name of the vehicle.
Was it the Corvair?
I might have been. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. I've been quoting this, and I don't even remember the name of that car. But so for me, it's like, you never know what's going to come out of these, huge failures, or seemingly huge failures, or the technology that they developed for this, this Fire phone. You never know what they're going to take and apply it to next, and that it wouldn't have happened if they didn't go for that leap.
So, Peter, do you have any stories you want to share about, maybe a time you've had a failure and had to kind of rely on your own personal values to say, here's why I'm doing this. Here's why what I'm trying to do aligns with the person that I really want to be.
Yeah, and this is not even a business one. So like you said in my intro, our family travels extensively. So I have 4 kids now. So, and they're 7 and under. And so we're busy at home. And I always like to say, like, I think I've had a really busy day until I get home and see what my wife's been dealing with all day. And then I realize that my job's easy because my customers don't crap their pants and ask me to wipe their butts, and they can feed themselves. And so, like, my job's cake, like I can hang up the phone on somebody that's being rude. Anyways, and so, one of the things that we have, we realized very early on in our relationship is that we like to travel, we like to see the world, and we think that it's really important for our kids to do the same. And so I had this leap where it was like, you know what, I've got some friends in the Cayman Islands, and I'm going to spend a month there, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to make it happen. And did a lot of research and picked the perfect place and all these things. And we're really budget conscious because I'm just not about burning money, and never have been, never will be. But we get there, and the place is just an absolute wreck. I mean, it's just awful. I won't even get into it, but it was terrible. It was traumatic for our family. I mean, we're all the way down there. If we live in the Midwest, we're all the way down there, and I have 3 kids at the time. One's a baby, and it was terrible. But then, I thought this is something that we've got to learn from. We're not going to just. A lot of folks, I think, would have been like, okay, this sucked. I'm not doing this ever again, and then that was it. And they just put out their mind, and they say, if somebody asked them like, hey, what about traveling? You would say, yeah, we tried that. It didn't work. We're not doing it again. But for us, I'm sitting there, and I'm on my computer, and I'm like, okay, I sit down with my wife after the kids go to bed. I'm like, okay, what can we learn from this? And so we made a huge list of like must-haves, and realized that we made some critical mistakes in choosing the way that we traveled. And the next time, it was a little bit better. I wouldn't say it was amazing, but the next time we traveled, it was a little bit better. And every year since then, we've kept this running list of like must-haves. And of course, it changes as you get older and kids get older. But we took that seemingly awful experience, and instead of just saying, filing that away and saying, okay, that's not for our family, we decided to learn from it. And since then, it's been, I don't know how long ago that was. If I put it on my mind, it's probably 4 years ago now. That we've had some amazing trips, like awesome trips. And I'm like, gosh, if we could have easily just stopped doing that. And so that's not a business example, but more importantly, I think it's a personal example of persevering and sticking to what you want to do and figuring out how to make it work.
Well, and I think it's important to tell those personal stories because they're a part of what makes you successful in business. They're a part of the lessons you learn in business applies to what you learn in your personal life and vice versa. And so I think it's very fitting. You just reminded me, I have a 20-year-old son who a lot of folks are always asking me, well, how's he doing? And I'll tell them, well, he's living in a garage. And they'll say, well, what are you doing about it? And I'm saying, I'm not doing anything about it, because the last time I saw him, he was getting ready to get out of our van. We were dropping him off after a holiday dinner. And I said, well, is that the garage you live in? And he says, yep. Someday I'm going to be able to tell a story about what I put myself through. And it was actually, strangely enough, one of the most proud moments I ever had with my son, because he knew that he had to create his own success in life. He never asks for help, which makes me proud as well. And even though he's not living that picture perfect life that we all, the American dream, if you will, he's happy. He had a smile on his face as he said this. And so sorry, I don't mean to steal a spotlight from you, but you reminded me of that story. And I just thought it was such a neat thing for someone of his age to say, and an insight that he shared with us that I don't even know if he realized he shared it.
That's so incredible wisdom there from him, as a 20-year-old young man, that he can see that from that he could learn a lot. And I've got a mentor of mine who's become a really good friend, and he had a quote, that I kind of stuck in my head. Is like, Peter, you'll learn a lot more from early failures than you will from early successes. And to me, like, this early adversity, or if you're tight on cash, or you're tight on other resources, they require you to think. They require you to think outside the box, so to speak. They require you to think creatively, so that you can make, wiser decisions, so you can think on your feet, so that you can do more grassroots efforts, whether it's, growing your business or starting a business, or, growing your position within a company. And so I think he's got, I don't know if he knew it or not, but a lot of wisdom there in his statement.
Oh yeah, I agree, and it takes, I guess a great act of faith and conviction in my own beliefs not to jump in and try to help him. One of the reasons he doesn't is I always told him, look, we don't have the money to help you. You're going to have to carve your own way out of this earth, and that was how my dad pushed me out into the world, and my sister, and I think I agree with it, and so it's difficult to sit back and watch your kid go through something like that. And a lot of people are saying, well, what are you doing to help him? And I'll say, I'm not doing anything except for helping him understand what he needs to understand, and telling him we love him. So, if he needs us, he knows where we are, but, otherwise he's not asking for help, and he's living through the adversity, and that helps me gain an enormous respect for him. So
Likewise.
Sorry, again, I don't mean to change the spotlight off of your story. You just kind of created a thought in my head that I wanted to share as part of the conversation.
No worries, I enjoy it.
So how are things going with Slow Hustle so far? What have you learned, and how are things going?
It's interesting. To me, they're going really, really great. I actually just recently made the decision to put even more focus on it, and so it's kind of this passion project, so to speak. And I tell people it's probably the most important decision I've ever made as far as starting Slow Hustle, because it feels like really meaningful work. We were just at this conference that I just mentioned, and I had people I didn't know approach me and say, "Hey, are you Peter from Slow Hustle?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, "Hey, I just wanted you to know that in this episode you said this thing, and it really stuck on my head, and I made some decisions to make some changes." And that's never happened to me. I'll have conversations with people, and they may or may not do certain things, and but those are folks that I know. Those are folks that I've met. But to have that type of reach where you're making a real impact, and they go out of their way to let you know that they've made those decisions and it's made a change and you've made a real impact. That to me is like, there's nothing, it's untouchable. There's nothing even a close second to that. And so, that's great. I mean, I think that having an excuse to talk to folks and interview them that probably otherwise would ignore my email is pretty awesome. Just our last episode that just went up was with a 3-time New York Times bestselling author, a guy that's went down a path that he may or may not regret, but has made some changes and is going has got it going about it in a different way, and started a new business and is doing some really awesome stuff. Being able to talk to people like that and grow my network, and have an excuse, like I said, to talk to them, and then also to on the selfish side of things, to have kind of this one-on-one therapy session with people and then share it with the world. To me, it's awesome. It's one of these where I feel like I've got my cake, and I have my cake and eat it too, so to speak. So, that long answer to your question is that it's growing really, really well, and I'm excited to see kind of where it's going to go next.
Yeah, one of the recurring themes I hear a lot in this BoomShare series so far is you're number 16 of the folks I've interviewed, and 16 times I've heard folks say in one way or another, I really just enjoy helping people. That's what I get most out of this. And so from that theme, I think that's really important, and it also has helped me touch on kind of a very human need. We feel like being successful is getting things, but really where we feel most successful is giving, helping someone, creating a new opportunity, a new thought process, whatever it is. And it sounds like that's what you were saying. I hope I didn't misrepresent you, but it sounded like that's what you were saying.
Exactly what I'm saying, man. And you think about Gary V's jab, 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 right hook. It's about giving and giving and giving before you try to go for the sale. I think you could take it even a step further and just say, like, that's really what all business is about these days. It's like, hey, how can I help you? Here's some information that'll help you, and just continuing to do that until that person's ready to buy or ready to consult with you, ready to purchase your product. Maybe they never will be, but it doesn't really matter because that's not your intention. Your intention is to help them first, and if they want to come for you for business second, that's great. And what's cool about it is it's much more meaningful work. You feel more satisfied. You're actually building relationships with people. You're having a good time doing it. It's a much more enjoyable way to work and live, in my opinion. And so I think that anybody in any business or any walk of life can apply that to their business, to their department in a corporation. It doesn't really matter where you are. I think that if you apply that to life, you can, it can be more meaningful, but just much more enjoyable in the long run.
Yeah, I would also say it creates newer opportunities sometimes that you didn't expect. And I'll give a personal example. I'm living right now. I'm creating and launching, or have created and I'm launching a new system. And so learning about customer discovery is kind of a newer concept for me in terms of, it's no longer the if you build it, they will come world. And so what I've really focused on is picking 5 or 6 clients that I would give this service to free and dedicating it 3 or more months of my life to saying, I don't expect 1 cent of income. And my focus is serving these customers as if they were my livelihood. And from that, in just the last 2 days, I've gotten 2 separate clients, if you will, free clients, who I've been working with the system and who've said, help me understand how I can become a reseller of this product, because I don't just see the value for my business. I see how I can use it to help my customers. And I never would have thought that this idea, this concept could be marketed by other people or sold by other people. And so the opportunities that giving creates are often unexpected.
No doubt about it, man. And those are really fun when these business opportunities come out of left field, right? And you see people that you've met, that you admire, that like maybe you're just working with casually, as far as having conversations, and they're helping you and you're helping them, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I saw this business opportunity, Tom. You want to work on it with me? Those things are just really, I think that's just fun. These opportunities that you never expected.
Yeah, my mind is blown, but at the same time, now I'm trying to say, all right, now how do I keep improving this product, focusing on these folks, and taking advantage of this opportunity at the same time, because I made commitments to them. And so, hey, that's a great challenge to have. It's better than trying to say, I have 24 hours in a day, and how am I going to fill them up? How am I going to do something that will create value? Because I'm obviously somehow I'm already creating value. It's just the financial side of that value hasn't shown itself to me yet, but I believe it will. And that's part of, I'd say, the challenge and the risk of entrepreneurship, and also it, as you said earlier, kind of that pendulum swing of, man, that fear of just laying yourself out there and in this idea and saying, hey, this isn't just an idea, this is me, and I'm going to put myself all into it.
Right. You got to own it. And then there's also that, that inconvenient thing of bills in the meantime. Right. And so just figuring out how to continue to feed yourself while cooking on this idea is, I think, a lot of people's quandary, and, if you believe in it and you own it, and you go for it.
Yeah, and that challenge is certainly, staring me in the face every day. But you have to look past that here and now. You have to look out and say, there's something more to what you're doing. I've tried to walk away from this idea more than once, and I've told my wife many mornings, I couldn't sleep last night because I'm going to work this morning, knowing I'm not doing what I'm meant to do. And this idea, no matter how much I try to ignore it and go work for somebody else, is still kicking me in the gut and saying, you're not doing it, Tom. You've got something here that can help people. And anyway, sorry again, I don't mean to make this about me, but you bring up some great ideas that help me want to talk for once. So
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a little experience with that. So that's okay, man. I don't mind it at all. It's a two-way conversation.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a boom share slow hustle, isn't it?
It's fine with me. Cool.
So, so anything new out there you're working on, Peter? Anything you want to tell people about that's coming up?
Yeah. So, we talked about family traveling, and I'm working on the plans for being gone for a year. And so, we've always done the month to 6 week thing in the winter, and looking to step it up now. So, look out for an extreme failure or extreme success. We'll see what happens. But with that, I think that we're going to add another segment to the Slow Hustle podcast and the show, and that is going to be called Slow Hustle Family. And so, what's interesting is that this is my wife's idea, and I think it's an excellent one. That a lot of the slowness tips that I have from founders are mostly centered around spouse, family, extended family, friends. And so I feel like the travel aspect is a huge part of that. Like we're like one of the least traveled countries. And Andy Stoll had mentioned this. I mentioned him earlier. Him and I did a 2 hour episode. Um, we're one of the least traveled countries, but that's one of our highest desires. And so I want to talk about the travel and everything that goes on in it, the good and the bad. So, you know, the decision, why did it, the process behind making a decision, what it looked like to get out to where we're going, how, what we're doing for schooling for our kids, just like every, nook and cranny of that experience, because I think that'd be hugely beneficial to people that are, that have a family or thinking about having a family, that are thinking about traveling on their own. I don't think it really matters. And then how I'm running my business, the experiences I'm having as far as meeting people that I didn't expect to meet, just kind of like all the nuances to extended travel for both personal and business. To me, I'm excited to kind of see what happens and to document it just for myself. And so, and then share it with the listeners. And so, that's what's going to be new and kind of coming around the corner if we can get everything to align, which I am pretty determined to make happen.
So it sounds like what you're trying to help people do is kind of find that perfect blend. And I always use the word perfection because I think we should always be driving toward it. But to be clear, I don't believe perfection is really attainable. But if we know what, say, that perfect life looks like, and how that perfect blend of, say, the personal side, the family, commitments, the being with people you love, in addition to doing what you love with sometimes people you don't love, they may not, crap in their diaper and want you to wipe their butt, but sometimes it feels like it. And and so doing that for someone you love is different than doing it for someone you don't love. But finding that perfect blend sounds like what you're really trying to help folks do with Slow Hustle and this new idea of Slow Hustle Family, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, perfect blend's a good way to put it. I mean, I just, I call it, keep trying to get the pendulum as close to the middle as possible. And so you swing left, you swing right, so to speak. And you're never going to be in the middle, which is perfection in your words. And so, but you want to see how close to the center you can be and get, and see if you can stay there as long as possible. Right. So, yeah, it's absolutely that. And what's interesting is that, you shoot for perfection, but people don't typically know what that is. Right. And so this example we'll go back to is 9 months of travel. Some people say, well, man, I'd love to travel. What would be perfect for me is I travel for 9 months out of the year, or I travel all next year, do some kind of sabbatical thing. And then I'd say, but they just, in their mind, they just put it out of their mind, it's unattainable. People don't do that, right? That's not what people do. And for me, it's like, okay, nobody does that, so I'm going to do that. Like, I want to do that thing. And constantly asking yourself, what if I did the opposite? Opposite of what my colleagues are doing, opposite of what other families are doing. I like thinking that way, and it drives my wife crazy probably. But and so back to that example, it's like, okay, well, what would it look like if you traveled for 9 months? I'll pose that question to you, Tom. What would it look like if you had to travel for 9 months? What are some of the things you'd have to think about?
Oh, you definitely got to think about, little things like where are you going to get your food? Where are you going to take showers? How are your kids going to get clean? When are you going to stop and focus on focus on teaching your kids and educating them, because they're not in school. They're in a different school now. And it's all of the things we take for granted in the comfortable lives that we create because we're following the example of our parents and everyone around us. And because of that, you raise a great question of what are the things we're not thinking of because we don't have to anymore, because we've created this safe life. And having been in the military, been on deployment, been out in the field and have to think about those things, I kind of can relate to a lot of them. But at the same time, when it comes back to answering your question as a family man who owns a house, it is a very compelling question.
Yeah. And so some of the things you said there, you've got to figure out where you're going to live. You got to figure out your finances. You got to figure out school for your kids. You got to figure out where you're going to work or how you're going to support yourself. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's interesting about this is that, you have a lot of folks that telecommute. Not everybody that's listening or watching this telecommute. We have people that work from home. Right. And for me, for school, we homeschool. Right. And so let's say you don't homeschool, you figure out, okay, well, what would I do there? How would I take my kids out of school, right? So you can look up all kinds of meetups. Like we're thinking about Arizona, we're thinking about California. There's meetups all over the place with homeschooling groups that you can just drop right into and have a support group, right? And then as far as like where you're going to live, what was interesting for me is people are like, well, how are you going to afford that? Like, Peter, you must be just like, you have money coming out of your ears. Well, no, I don't. Actually, I'm pretty tight on the wallet. Like probably frustrates my wife as well. And so for me, I'm like, okay, well, I'm contacting realtors in both places. And I come to find out that I can rent my house here, plus utilities and all that stuff, and then rent a house where I want to go for not much difference. It's a couple $100 a month. And so then when I tell that to people, I'm like, hell, well, now, if you look at 9 months, let's say $200 a month is what it's going to cost me to live in this new place. Well, now we're talking about $1,800. So now we just took and we distilled down this seemingly unattainable thing to $1,800. So now you think, okay, well, my goal is to save $2,000 just to be safe, right? So if somebody's going to go through and say, okay, I'm going to save $2,000. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save $200 a month for 10 months, and now I just made this unattainable goal attainable. And so for me, I just like to break it down and make it overly simplistic. Sure, there are going to be things that are going to come up that are going to surprise us. Sure, there are going to be things that we decided that are going to be painful. Right, I never said it was going to be easy. I said it was going to be simple, right? And so, after all that's said and done, now you've got this 9-month experience that's going to stretch you. And one other thing you talked about, Tom, is that these are certain things that are in our comfort zone, certain things that we get used to, like we know where we're going to shop, we know where the kids are going to go to school, we know where we're living, all these different things. But I'll never forget an article that I read several years ago. It talks about how when you get older, time seems to speed up, and why is that? Well, essentially what it came down to is that your brain has a cache, just like a computer. And so when you're doing the same things, you're going to the same place, you're driving on the same highway to work, you're doing all the same stuff every single day, your brain physically processes it faster because it has the cache, and these are not new things. It's like, I've seen that tree before, I've looked at that bluff before, I've seen this building before, I don't have to process them anymore. And so what's cool is that you go into a new environment and you find yourself slowing down and saying, oh, look at the mountains, or look at the hills, or look at this building, or look at this beautiful tree. Like, look at these different people, these different stores. And it's processing things. So actually your perception of time slows down. And so in order to continue to do that, you have to have new experiences.
Well, that's really a neat way of looking at it, and creates a new insight for me, because I always thought that the reason time speeds up had to do more with the anticipation. When I was younger, I couldn't wait to be old enough to drive, and I couldn't wait to be old enough to go to college. I couldn't wait to be old enough to be, to go to a bar and buy a beer. And once I hit a certain age, I had done all of those things. And maybe it's a little bit of both, but I like that concept of, hey, if I'm driving to work every day and I'm looking at the same scenery, yeah, there's no need for my brain to process it. And so the moment is lost because of the lack of real exercise. It's like if you did 10 push-ups a day for the rest of your life, you wouldn't even feel those push-ups after a few days, and the rest of your life, it would almost be meaningless.
Think about a couple of things. One, people say, well, hey, take a different route to work, right? So those are one of the reasons why they'd have you take a different route to work. But then in that same example, think about the times, Like I used to live in Orlando, so I'd have a little bit of a commute to work where I would get off the ramp and I'd be pulling up to my office and I'd be like, man, I don't even remember getting off the highway. Like I don't even remember. Why? Because your brain's on autopilot. Like you take a right, you take a left, you get off, exit ramp 27A or whatever. You're not thinking about those things anymore. You're like an autonomous, like a robot, right? Because you've done that over and over and over again. There's nothing new about it.
Yeah, it's a great point. And getting back to your trip, a thought that just completely intrigues me of a trip that you're like, of the one you're talking about. I'm assuming you're going all over the place, and I just can't even imagine the people you'll meet and the new relationships you'll form. And so when you're asking me a question of what are things you need to think of, well, one of the things you need to think of is, well, how am I going to meet people where I'm going? How am I gonna find people who aren't gonna judge that maybe I'm living on a bus with my kids and we look like this ragtag bunch of the Partridge Family who can't play music. I don't know, but that's another thing you have to think of, because part of that experience is meeting the people. And so how are you going to do that? Do you have a plan?
Yeah, I do. So for me, it's really about two things. One, it's knowing what the resources that are out there in order to facilitate these collisions, as Tony Hsieh would call them. And then two is understanding you are going to be damn uncomfortable. Like you have to put yourself in these uncomfortable situations. And also, just as a side note, I just have come to meet and build relationships with lots of people here in the Midwest, which is awesome. But at the same time, you get to a certain point where now I'm that guy that's gravitating towards all the people I know at the conferences I go to, and I'm not stretching myself as much anymore. Like I have to think, okay, I know those 500 people, and I love them, and I don't get to see them that much, but I need the excitement is in the other 500. So I need to make sure that I put myself out there. So just something to think about. But anyways, so as far as resources, like, I referenced Meetup. So meetup.com is going to help us with like plugging in and dropping into homeschooling communities, making it a point to I'm a church going guy, church going family. And so making it a point that we find a church home as quickly as possible and plug into that. My wife will get into, mom groups. I'll get into, some dad groups and men's groups, so that I can make sure I can build some kind of community as quickly as I can. And develop those deep relationships and have some quote unquote family where we go. And so those are some of the things. I know that I'm going to look for co-working spaces before I get out there and sign up for, having a drop-in desk at wherever it is that I go. And so I can have some business community. 1 Million Cups is a really great organization or event through Kaufman that allow me to drop in and see, different businesses that are getting launched and drop into the community. So what I'm actually doing is I'm taking all the things that I've done over the last, 7-8 years, and I want to consolidate them into, a very short period of time. So I think about, okay, how did I develop community here? And how can I accelerate that? So instead of spreading it across 7 years, can I do that in a few weeks? Which are all the things that I just mentioned. And so through that, and then stretching myself and putting myself in uncomfortable situations, which is going to places that, going to events where I know I'm not going to know a single soul, and reaching out and saying, hey, I'm Peter. I'm traveling across the country with my family. I'm crazy. I'm living in a bus, like you said. And this is what I'm working on. What are you working on? How can I help you? And so leading with that question of how can I help you, I think that, it could lead to some really interesting things. And my excitement is exactly what you said, Tom, and that's just meeting new people from all walks of life, all across the country, doing, different things. I think that to me is the absolutely most exciting thing, right behind the fact of seeing the awe in my kids' eyes when they see things they haven't seen before in their lives.
Yeah, that's an amazing feeling. And so, think of the gift you're giving and how you'll be helping your kids, your wife, create a life that matches a dream that most people only have in their minds and their imaginations. So, is there any way, so asking about how you can help, any way people out there can help you, Peter, as you move forward with Slow Hustle or on your trip that you're planning right now?
Yeah. I, of course, I'd love for people to listen to Slow Hustle podcast and grab that on iTunes or Stitcher. Check out slowhustle.com. But more importantly, if and when you do listen, feedback, man. I like feedback on what we're doing right, but more importantly, what we're not doing well. If we're not asking questions that we should be asking, I want to know about them, and then I want to know about people that I've never heard of that. They're doing really great things. They're not famous, but they're doing amazing things, and I want to talk to them. Like I think about a friend of mine who I had on the show who, she's not famous, but man, she's done some amazing things with nonprofits. And they've got something that called the Dress Project right now they're working on, where they're taking this remnant inventory of like bridesmaid dresses that people use once and they keep in the back of their closet, and they're turning it into businesses. They're turning it into businesses for people in Africa, which she has a lot of ties in, and she's been to, I don't know, 50 times or something. But I'm like, man, talk about doing something really impactful. Like taking this remnant inventory, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of stuff that's just going to sit in somebody's closet for 20 years before they take it to the Goodwill, and turning it into businesses for people. I mean, that to me is some meaningful stuff. And so if somebody has someone out there that's doing some really amazing stuff, that understands slowness, and that has a story where they maybe didn't listen to themselves, and they had they lost 10 years of their life to their company, and then they came back and realized what was most important. I like hearing from those people. So long answer to your question, man, but that's how somebody could help is making some connections with folks that their voice needs to be heard.
Yeah, that's a good one. I would say, I'm always looking for folks whose stories should be shared also. So I get that's probably the biggest need. If we're trying to help people, we got to find them. Yeah. And so how do people find you, Peter?
Yeah. So Twitter's great. So at Slow Hustle. My handle's at Peter Awad. That's PeterAwad. Just remember Awad if you want to remember my last name. And slowhustle.com, peterawad.com. Those are all great places.
Okay. Is there anything you wanted to anything else you wanted to share that maybe you didn't ask about before we close up this morning?
No, man, I'm good. I think we covered a lot of ground. It's been fun.
Yeah, I agree. I always enjoy a great conversation. Some of the most enriching parts of my day, my week, are doing these BoomShare episodes with different people, and this has been a great one. I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time. So, well, if you don't have anything else, Peter, I'm gonna thank you one more time, and we're gonna tell everybody to come back and see us on episode number 17. I'm not really sure who we're gonna have yet. But I know coming up, we've got an organization called Building Blocks that is out there working across the state of Nebraska to find foster homes for kids who need homes, who need parents to help raise them. I'm really excited about that one because it's going to be on site, and I'm going to have 3 folks in the room with me, and so that'll be a great experience. And to use Peter's term, it'll either be an extreme success or an extreme failure. So
awesome, cool. Thanks for having me, man.
All right. Thank you. And everyone have a great day.